Hi, I'm Dr. Scott McLaughlin at the University of Leeds. I'm a composer and I'm going to talk about letting material perform, talking about indeterminacy in performance. I'm going to talk about a few of my own works and focusing on an idea of indeterminacy that's less to do with arbitrary sounds and more to do with following the materiality of the instrument in performance, the performer and the instrument working together. So some theory that sits behind this, that's informed my way of thinking about this. Andrew Pickering's Mangle of Practice, Tim Ingold's ideas on working with things, Donna Haraway, Karen Barad, particularly Pickering's idea of a dance of agency between humans and materials, what he describes as an open-ended modelling process. This is a continuous process where practice is, as he describes it, interactively stabilised, as agencies are reciprocally and emergently defining and sustaining each other. So in the context of performance, this is how the pieces that I'll look at today are. The performer is asked to work with the instrument, interactively stabilizing sounds that emerge through that performance. Tim Ingold talks about materiality as a process of working with materials, not just doing to them, and of bringing form into being rather than merely translating from the virtual to the actual. So in these pieces, the performer works to support the instrument in its materiality. The performer works with the instrument, not doing to it, trying to bring emergent sonic form into being. Donna Haraway talks about making space for unexpected companions, a web of always too much connection where responsibility must be cobbled together, passing patterns back and forth, giving and receiving, patterning, holding the unasked-for pattern in one's hands. Becoming with, not becoming, is the name of the game. Becoming with is how partners are, in Vincent Desprez's terms, rendered capable. So in these pieces, the performer is asked to become kin with the instrument, responding to the always too much resonance and opportunity of sound on the edge of multiple possibilities, unstable sound. The player is becoming with the instrument, both rendered capable of supporting the emergent sound. And a sound that emerges in the moment of performance, partially predictable in advance, but not always. Donna Haraway talks about the concept of intra-action, which she says signifies the mutual constitution of entangled agencies, that is, in contrast to the usual interaction, which assumes that there are separate individual agencies that precede their interaction. The notion of intra-action recognizes that distinct agencies do not precede, but rather emerge through their intra-action. In these pieces, the performer's becoming with is a sonic emergence. The intra-action is the dance of human and material agencies. I won't go into these in any more depth. I'll spring back to those ideas a little as I talk through the pieces, but you can go read several articles I've written in the last year or two that look into this in a bit more detail and expand on the ideas some more. So let's jump on to looking at some musical examples. I'm going to talk through 4 pieces of mine: The Endless Mobility of Listening for violin and live electronics. The whole is encountered by going further into the parts for prepared contrabass. Strata for clarinet with punctured barrel and corks, and a prepared guitar improvisation from this year. In this diagram here, which you can see is how these pieces connect to each other along 2 lines. One is an idea of what is it within this piece that is sustaining the sound, allowing for what Haraway calls ongoingness, a continued support and sustaining, a liveliness. Within stretching from the first violin piece into the double bass piece, it's the idea of bowing. The bowing is a continuous sound. And this is coupled with a destabilizing technique. In The Endless Mobility of Listening, this is a non-standard bowing technique, which you'll see in a minute, which exposes spectral aspects in I think, a relatively novel way. In The Whole is encountered by going further into the parts, this non-standard technique moves further into not simply being about the standard spectrum of the string, but being about a prepared string, which is an inharmonic spectrum, which changes the game quite a bit. Moving laterally, Strata and several other clarinet pieces I've written the bowing, the continuous nature of the bowing is replaced by the breathing action, which of course in a wind instrument is less a back and forth and more a continuous pressurized support, a support for the instrument to do things. Strata is in its own way a clarinet also that's prepared by puncturing the barrel, which we'll see out in a moment, which destabilizes it. And the prepared guitar improvisation stretches the preparation onto the guitar, but also uses an ebow, which is an electronic bowing device. So all of these pieces continue a research idea. To briefly move through the pieces, The Endless Mobility of Listening was written for Mira Benjamin. The focus here is on a particular technique, as you'll see in a moment, which we call drone bowing, which through non-standard playing techniques, very light bowing, very gentle, sometimes quasi-flautando, allows the spectrum of the fundamental to recede into the background and for emergent harmonics to come out. There's no left-hand action. The harmonics emerge purely as a contingent action of the string, and it's difficult, if not impossible, to predict which harmonics will come out, but through playing and iterating through it, you can learn to behave, or learn what the behavior of that string will be in that moment, and start to see which its preference is. We'll see an example here. The next piece is the whole is encountered by going further into the parts, which was written for prepared contrabass. The preparations I'm using here, this is an old example, uses a wooden circle, kind of like a polo mint, with a groove in it which sits in between the strings. And this preparation mechanically couples the two strings together, so the bow energy activates both. If you bow one string, it transfers into the other string, so the strings interfere with each other, creating a kind of inharmonic ring modulation. I then moved on to getting a local woodmaker to turn me some very beautiful wooden preparations. You can see here versions for strings, for double bass at the top, cello down on the right, and violin and viola on the left. We'll see an example of this piece, and what you'll hear as this example unfolds is that as Christopher bows back and forth, the string is constantly fighting between two pitches. What happens throughout this piece then is the player is instructed by the score to find one of these places where there is a tension between different sounds trying to happen, and to try and move between those, but then to slowly expand the parameters of their bowing such that the gentle tension starts to break, and at some point the sound will emerge, some new sound connection will emerge that they can follow. So it really is about following the emergent elements of the material. But in both this and the last piece, what I think you see in relation to Pickering is this interactive stabilization. The player is constantly working with the instrument to see what it wants to bring out, yet also gently coaxing it into slightly different behaviors. To move away from bowed strings for a moment, Strata is a piece written as part of the Garden of Forking Paths project in a HRC Leadership Fellowship. And in this case, the experiment, working with Carlos Cordero, was to puncture the barrel. The barrel is the part of the clarinet which has the most effect on timbre, spectrum, and intonation. By puncturing the barrel, we add further vent holes. And across this piece, what happens is Carlos has a relatively simple fingering pattern to repeat, moving up and down through the instrument. But what he's looking for is the moments where the interference from the punctured barrel means that there is a collapsing of the register, and it jumps from register to register, and at that moment he then tries to bring out the duality of both registers. Later in the piece he also plays the barrel on its own, which is both highly unstable but also highly interactively stabilizable. And finally, this piece for prepared guitar mixes some of these elements by using a preparation in the same way that the bowed string pieces use, but also using an e-bow, which is an electronic bow designed for a guitar, which essentially mimics a string bow, with the difference that there's no back and forth, there's simply the bowing. But like a string bow, the position of the e-bow on the string will alter the harmonic response. And like with the other prepared instruments, the use of the preparation on this creates an inharmonicity, which is something that the player can surf. In this extract, what you'll see is I'm both using left-hand pizzicato to hammer on the notes, which excites them, which also then kickstarts the e-bow. But the e-bow works with the hysteresis of the string, so there's a tendency for it to focus in on one particular frequency area and bring out whichever harmonic is nearest to that frequency area. You'll also see, the video I'm afraid is not great, but you'll see at times I'm moving e-bow around the string, trying to find the places, explore the places where it wants to bring out these harmonics. I hope these few pieces give you a sense of how materiality and indeterminacy work together in this body of practice. How the player, through their performance, rather than trying to control the instrument, is instead trying to support the instrument in the dance of agency, as Pickering puts it, to allow a kind of kinship with the instrument that supports it to bring out whatever emergent harmonics or resonances it wishes to, and to support those in place, knowing that also they will at some point shift and move somewhere else at the whim of the instrument.